So we want to thank them for takes a little bit of money to put these together. We got it? Awesome. Hey, welcome all you people out there online. We know there's a lot of you who are going to tune in, so hopefully you'll catch this. All right, so we'll start here by thanking all these people. And then, of course, WKLM, Historical Society Program Committee for all their work at getting these things organized. Harry Wilson's our photographer, he's not here tonight. Melissa is our technical advisor, and Jack of all trades. Beth, are you here? Yep. Beth provided information on the Fisher Restaurant. She is a relative. It was her grandma that had the restaurant, Fisher Restaurant. And Maxwell family for providing some of the things, images that you'll see in the program. Ted and Roddy DeHass, they were great. They gave us a lot of information about the castle. Tootsie Snyder, also from the DeHass family. Deborah DeHass Beachley, and also Evie DeHass Cook. So it takes a whole bunch of people to get these things going. All right, one part of the program. How many were aware till tonight that our entire downtown area and then zone is part of the National Historic District? Awesome, good. Does anybody know who nominated in 1982 when it was done? No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. No? Well, you'll find out here in a minute. How did we get to be the National Historic District and what it all means? Okay, in 1982, a man by the name of David Simmons, now I'll bet nobody in this group knows David Simmons, and I thought I had him tracked down after all these years at the State Historical Society. I found out that he was employed there at David Simmons, who went to Ohio State about 1982, and I thought, I finally found the guy. So they said, well, we're sorry, but he retired. And I said, well, how can I find him? Because the Privacy Act that can't give me his information. So they said, give us a minute, and we'll call you back, and I think we can find out where he's at for you. So they called back and they said, his daughter works here. Oh, great. So the daughter called me and I said, I'm trying to track your dad down that did this. Called back and said, I'm sorry, I'm not the David Simmons who did that. I have no idea. So Mr. Simmons is still out there somewhere. And he was a student at OSU at the time, and he had to do a project on getting a historic district that was part of his class project. He came to Millersburg, he rented an apartment, and he spent about a year compiling information about our downtown and our historic district. There are over 120 buildings in the National District. Okay, so in 1982 and 83, he did a photographic inventory that he submitted with the document to the State Historical Society Preservation Office that handles the National Registry. And in 1984, after many letters back and forth, The entire application is back there in a notebook. I was able to find the entire submission that he did and the photographs. And we're going to run through this pretty quickly here tonight. Okay, so here's the original map that he presented to them with the National District boundaries, and I did put them in red so you can see. Now, this is the original map that he provided, and they're coded by when the buildings were built by their slash marks, so you can look at that. I have a sample back there on our, so you can look at it afterwards. The district runs the entire length of Jackson Street all the way up to the school, and it includes Dick Steinel's and Sharon Houston's house that was just sold. And then it goes west down to Anthony Street, and all the way south to the park south of town on South Washington Street. And on both sides of Washington and then the park, it goes jogs up to Place. I took this part as just the downtown section so you can get an overview of where that goes. And thanks to the map office, now this is hard to see, but there's a copy back here if you want to look at it. This is the current GIS map, and they down at the map office, they took an outline where it is currently with the current buildings, since many of the buildings have been torn down since the original map. Okay, so now we're going to go on a real quick journey. These are all the photographs that he submitted down to the state. Now we're going to start at the school, and I'm sorry, we're going to start at the school, and we're going to go down through, and I want you to pay attention to how many things have changed since 1982. A lot. The businesses, buildings torn down, etc. So there we are at the school. Pretty much looks the same. Anybody know where that house was? Before there was Airbnbs, they were tourist homes. And this was a tourist home right next to the Mennonite church, which this building, this house has been torn down, and that house has been torn down. That's now the parking lot beside the Mennonite church. We used to have a sign out front that said tourist home. There's Carol Seacrest's house. And there's Elaine's house, the old England property. All of that's been torn down. That's now where Kaufman Realty is. The market, and then years ago that was a floral shop in the white building. Ted Money. That's the apartment buildings, and then this house, the Vance building, is the one here with the, right here. This has been torn down. Remember Jade and Sandy? I remember going there almost weekly. All those businesses are different now on that block. Oh, by the way, look at the gas price, $1.28. Commercial Bank block. That's when the library was up there. Now this is on the west end of town. That's now Elby's, and going up the street was Elaine's dad's. Okay. Whoa. They say we got found back there and they gave us something like that. So anyway, this is the west end now. Now we're down, you may know that. When I was growing up, this used to be Bob's Drive-Thru. This is the laundromat. That's now Domino Pizza. That's where the greenery is. That was the state store. And on down further, if you get a little bit closer, you can see it. It has the King and I bookstore, remember that? And Spector's Records. That was a Common Grocery and Pound Tavern. Of course, the rest of that is still the same. Now we go down to the church, the Presbyterian Church. That's the commercial bank was there then. That's not any different. That's further down across from the Lutheran Church. That was George Ellis's office. I believe that's parking at Dowell's house on Lee Street, or South Lake. That's going down South Washington Street, and that was McDowell Insurance, and then that building was the Estill House, and that's one of the oldest houses standing in Millersburg. It was built in the 1835 area. Post office side, you'll notice that the houses are torn down to the south of the post office. That's now just an empty lot. That's the Bigham House and Hofstadter's house. Are they here tonight? Yeah, there, that's your house. That's right across the street from the Bigham House. Those houses are still there. And that's further down the street. Now this, I'm told, is the oldest house standing in Millersburg. Beside the other one, this little house was built in 1830. And that's the Anderson House. Now David Rowe lives in that house. And that was built in 1840. Susie here? Okay, that's Susie Shine's house. Okay, so that was just a quick run through how it looked in 1982, and because we had so many historical buildings, they were able to designate the criteria, they were able to designate as a National Historic District. Now, why is the National Historic District important today? Well, I've always said that Millersburg has a lot going for it. A lot of people don't realize why. Top one, because we're a National Historic District, our village government some years back got designated as a certified local government, CLG. Now what that means, there are only 68 certified local governments in the entire state of Ohio. Millersburg is one. What does that do? That raises the level of them being able to get funding through different grant sources because we have a National Historic District and we have a nationally certified city government. So, that's why they got the money for the hotel renovation, and as we speak, I guess the other night, they announced that there is a $200,000 grant to replace all these windows in this building. That's why it's important we have both designations, because it rises to the top for them to be able to get grants. So, yay for the village to have the foresight to get certified government and then link with the National Historic District. By the way, the National Historic District is the same as the National Registry, which individual properties are. The Victorian House is one, the Perry House is an individual property. So it's the same designation, except it's for a whole area instead of one building. Strategic location. All roads in Millersburg are national scenic highways. All roads in Holmes County basically are scenic highways. The only county in the state like that. Also, that gives us more ability to get federal byway funds, and ODOT can apply for projects because we're on the National Scenic Byway. And Millersburg, how many knew this, is the headquarters for the National Scenic Byway Foundation. And Sharon Strauss is the executive director for the National Scenic Byway. So we got that going for us. We have the only rails to trail system in the country, I believe, that has a companion Lucky Trail. And the infrastructure in Millersburg is there to support growth, as opposed to other communities in the county that don't have as much lot of sources of income, great income. So, is there any quick questions for me? At the end, we're going to open it up for all three presentations so you can comment about all of it. But if there's a quick question, then we'll turn it over to Leslie after. Okay, that's a good question. Is there restrictions? Okay, for instance, when they got a grant for this building, I believe that I'm correct on this, they have to use wood windows. They cannot use vinyl replacement because it's in the Nation District, and the funding source is through a preservation grant. The preservation grant has certain restrictions depending on what it is, if it's windows, building, structure, whatever. So there are restrictions on what they can do. Contrary to what you may have heard, a property listed in the National Historic Registry or an individual property or in the district was not prevented from being torn down. Just so you understand that. I get so many phone calls and say, how can they tear that down? It's on the National Registry. That's only a designation. It's not a policeable thing. So if it's privately owned, it can be torn down. We don't like it, but any other questions? I'll turn it over to Leslie. Okay, so look at those maps over there, and I don't know this. Anybody here from the village? Do you have a set of those maps? Brent? Do you guys have a set down there? Okay, I'm going to give you those for the village. Because I think we didn't have, map office didn't have them either, so I gave them stuff. Okay, here comes Melissa on the Maxwell Brothers and Fisher Road.
I'm going to come over to this side so that way I'm not standing in front of people. I think it'll be better that way. So my part of the program is on the Maxwell Brothers clothing and Fisher's Home Restaurant. We're going to start with Maxwell Brothers, and I definitely want to thank the Maxwell family for inviting me to come to the house, get some pictures that you're going to see in here, and a awesome set of writing from Alethea helped me be able to put together for both projects, and Beth Logan was super helpful in helping me with Fisher's Home Restaurant as well for getting the information for this. So we will start out with Maxwell Brothers Clothing, went from 1866 until December 31st of 2001. So we start out in the beginning. And so they had a great location. Maxwell's was a men's clothing store on West Jackson Street. It was founded by Robert Maxwell and his brother JT. So the green arrow on the map, I use our Sanborn maps, which were used for insurance purposes back then. And so where the green arrow points, it's the same map, just two different versions of it, was the location. So just on the other side of Hotel Millersburg, you can see the courthouse there in both blue and purple. So you had all of the lawyers, the politicians, everybody right there. Everybody needed nice clothes, and so they had a fabulous location. So in 1866, Maxwell's became the reality, and it was located next to the hotel. And the hotel had just also been expanded in 1864. So they just had the courthouse, the nice new courthouse. They expanded the hotel. It was a perfect time that the brothers felt to put in the clothing store. So the first generation, and this is one of, the family had these pictures put together for each of the generations. I was able to get in and take pictures of their pictures before they were distributed to family here recently, and so super big thanks for letting me come and do that. So Robert Maxwell and Mary Albertson, who she passed away in 1905, were married in 1860. They had John W. and H.B. and B.E. of Cincinnati and a daughter who married Mr. Charles Reed. Because of the way that they wrote things in history, everything that I had written, it just had that she was married to Mr. Charles Reed, and it was frustrating as far as names, but they lived in Pittsburgh. So the building is a two-story building. The second-story building served as an office for JT. So just running the clothing store wasn't all that JT did. JT was very busy. He practiced law with partner George T. Shute for 30 years, and so Robert generally tended to manage the store. JT would also serve as prosecuting attorney for Holmes County from 1864 to 1868. He was a county school examiner. He was the mayor of Millersburg. He was a member of the Board of Deputy State Supervisor of Electors, and he also served as common pleas judge in 1896. So he was a busy guy. So Robert would pass in 1902. He had suffered from a slight paralysis 18 years prior, and his health just kind of went downhill after that. And one of the things that was said after he passed, that he was loved by all people and whose name was synonymous with honor and integrity. So they were well respected in the community. And so before he passed, the Maxwell Brothers clothing went on to the next generation. So J.W., John W. Maxwell, and H.B. Maxwell, who was Horace Bruce, or he went by Hod Maxwell. So in the fun fact, there's the picture of the store. We'll see that a little bit later in the slide. So in 1907, Dr. Lewis lived in the Robert Maxwell home along with some businessmen, and they, along with Hod, would purchase the Brightman House, and aka the Victorian House, for a sanitarium and rest home, which ended up failing. And after that, Mr. Fenton, who made Millersburg glass, lived in the Robert Maxwell home. So that home saw a lot of very common, well-known folks in Millersburg. So I just thought that was fun that there were all those connections to that one house that Robert Maxwell lived in. And that was her writings from Alethea. She wrote awesome generational descriptions for each of the first 3 generations that helped me put this together. So these pictures are from Maxwell Brothers in 1907, which is now in the second generation, and it was just before it was remodeled. So before they took over the store, both JT and Hod helped their father after school and during vacations. And then Hod would go on to marry Nettie Lemon, and they would have one son, HR, who would go by Kid. Extra clerks hired to work in the store at this point were Joshua Jones, Bert Anderson, and Dion Close. So they described how the items would come in, and these were nice items. They arrived in the store in beautiful wooden boxes that would be treasured today. Clothing would be stacked or placed in drawers, not hung. And although golf was not in vogue in Holmes County, they had golf caps. It was kind of in the style then. And they were also sold the derby style hats. They had the stiff white collars for those well-dressed gentlemen. And they also had ties that were displayed on brackets and were in demand. And so these writings were, like I said, from Alethea in the Holmes County Hub. Also in the Maxwell Brothers clothing store, it was an Ohio Bell location. So you can see above them, it had the Ohio Bell sign, and that meant that there was a booth in the back of the store, and people could go there and make long-distance calls. The booth was connected to an Ohio Bell line, even though the company did not provide the phone service in the community. It still was able to provide that long-distance calling service. So, nice little fun fact about the store. And then there were 3. It was time to go to the next generation, and so I have the most information about HR, who would go by Chitty. So he was a member of the very first Boy Scout troop organized in 1908 in Millersburg. During high school
get to now.
Yeah, I got
Green
two.
system.
I think, okay, there, we're back. Hello, okay. So during high school and college vacations, during high school and college vacations, he'd work at Pullet Coal Mine or as a county surveyor with Lester Porter. And while attending the University of Pennsylvania, that's where he got the name Chitty, and it just stuck as he went through life. He would take over the store in 1925 and work with his father H.D. for a time until his father passed in 1939. He served on Millersburg Council from 1932 to 1940, and Chitty would have a son named Richard, and then he would later marry Alethea Fisher, and they had two more children, John Robert and Cindy McDowell. So the way things worked in the 30s, it's kind of a lot of driving for back then that you never would have thought of. So he made many trips to Cleveland because salesmen displayed their merchandise in the hotel rooms, and retail merchants would come up and they would choose what they thought was sell. So during World War II, when they had ration gas, the customers of the Maxwell Brothers store would give him a list of things to pick up while he was in Cleveland. And one time he even brought home a set of tires. And he needed the tires, and he was up there. So he was, part of it. I lost this one too. It just doesn't like me. It says it's air, but your speaker went off. So, let's try this again. So, he would, during World War II, he was kind enough to do that. So, along with the store, as was the past generations, he was not idle. He, along with the store and council, he also worked for the Red Cross for 40 years. He served as president of the Cemetery Association. He helped to restore the Victorian house and strived to get a tree planting commission formed. He offered a meet some each year, but necessary ordinances were never passed. He also worked, this has been something discussed now here in 2025, he worked for a truck bypass because he felt many future problems would be eliminated, but there was a lack of interest. He was also appointed to the board of directors of Commercial and Savings Bank in 1940 and became its president in 1958 until his death in 1977. I found it interesting that piece there kind of came right in line with 2025. So some fun stories about Millersburg, working at Maxwell's and nightlife in Millersburg. So Millersburg, we think of how things close rather early now. Millersburg was a Saturday night town well into the 60s. The streets were filled with people. It was time to go chat with your friends you hadn't seen all week. And stores were busy and stayed open until 11 p.m. It's unheard of today. The theater and the restaurant had many patrons, and Maxwell's would also rent out a tent. They had a street fair. They'd rent a tent and they'd pull stuff out into the tent for the street fair. So when it came to the holidays, busy time, they would have to hire 3 or 4 extra clerks. And on Christmas Eve, they would close early, and them and a bunch of other of the merchants would gather in the back of the store, and they would have their own little gathering before going home. Folks, some of the merchants included Chet DeWitt, John Fisher, Wayland Waltman, Norm Crandall, Walter Haxton, Wayne Turner, Barney Martin, Eddie Carl Conrad, Nick and Marge Gowatz, Bill Smith, Wynn Krill, Jim Schonk, Niall Hushutler, Butch Nebley, and Wayne McDowell, and Roy and Helen Burkey. Some of the extra clerks that they would hire at this time: Horace Red Smith, Eugene Irvin, Harold Ockert, Bill Smith, Freddie Ledick, Pete Gray, and Dee Elder. And on to the 4th generation. And big changes for Maxwell Brothers clothing. So the 4th generation was John Robert, who married Joy Smith, who she would pass away in 2017. They had 2 sons, John Todd and Brad Allen. And then there was Richard, who served in the U.S. Navy. He married Jean Stafford, and they had 2 children, Tim Croft and Morris Richard III. And actually, we just lost John this year, and Richard would have passed away in 2021. So in December 31st of 2001, the last sale was made at Maxwell Brothers clothing store, making it one of, if not the oldest family-owned clothing store in the U.S. While the store was doing okay, John made the comment that it just wasn't right for the next generation. John and Richard searched for a buyer who was willing to, of the building, who was willing to protect the structures and integrity as the Victorian atmosphere of the store had been retained for almost a century and a half. Old lines included Levi Strauss, Hart, Schaffner, and Marks and Woolrich. Woolrich says Maxwell Brothers was their oldest customer that they had supplying stores. And the 5th generation, it didn't stop there. So John's son Todd carries the name Maxwell Brothers Clothing Store, but it's not a clothing store. It's actually a pizza place in Florida. And so this was taken from their website. It says in 1866, at the end of the Civil War, Robert Maxwell opened what would ultimately become the oldest family-owned clothing store in the United States. Robert's goal was simple: provide a man his sturdy work clothes and Sunday suit. That mentality persisted for 4 generations and nearly 14 decades. Now Robert's great-great-great-grandson, Todd Maxwell, is carrying on the tradition of unparalleled quality and service. Although Todd and his business partner, Paco, specialize in beer and pizza versus beaver felt hats, the institution continues. So that is, the name continues, just a slightly different product being put out there. So 5th generation, it counts.
Do you know what city?
I want to say Palmetto, if I remember correctly, somewhere near there. So on to Fisher's Home Restaurant, 1926 to 1947. So Fisher's Home Restaurant was located across the street from the courthouse, and so it is actually where Three Feathers Pewter is now, so where it glows. And this is a picture of inside. So at the time of the restaurant, it was actually considered 3 East Jackson Street, which now is 12 East Jackson Street. So the family was all part of Fisher's Home. Fisher's was started by Bert Fisher of Nashville and his uncle Commodore DeWitt of Millersburg in 1926, and because Bert could no longer work in the plastering business. Commodore would actually die in 1929, and Bert and his wife Effie and their son John, you see in the middle there in the bottom picture, would then own the business. John would marry Thelma, and they would have 2 girls, Pat Spar and Betty Heskel. They're married names now, obviously. John's sister was Alethea Maxwell, who was married to Chitty, the 3rd generation owner of Maxwell Brothers Clothing. Big full circle there. These are some of the pictures that were provided to us of the Fisher family home, the Amber in later years, and then a young Effie Brown Fisher Christmas tree. So one of the pictures I got to take of at the Maxwell house, this picture here is actually in a really big frame. And on the back of that frame was those 2 pictures there were taped on the back. I have copies of those over on the one of the tables over there, if you'd like to get it up close. Look at it. The picture in the top of the handwriting is Alethea writing about her life and part of her story. And there's some really neat things, some fun facts, some cute things on there, so that's printed over there. This is that menu. So these were the days of 10-cent sandwiches with soup, 20 cents for a banana split. Coffee was 5 cents with countless refills, and beef or chicken dinners, which included fluffy mashed potatoes, all prepared by hand, vegetables, cream cucumber salad when in season, coleslaw fruit or pudding for 60 cents. That is a heck of a meal for 60 cents. And Effie's homemade pies were made from scratch, and they were gone by 2 p.m., and she could never make enough. People used to line up the block to get into the restaurant. and the waitresses earned $10 a week. So if you think about what you're paying food there, $10 a week was pretty nice. So that was a copy of their menu and what they were charging there. So family equals taking care of your community. And that is what Fisher's restaurant did. Salesmen would come through Worcester and Millersburg to stay in the 2 hotels and eat at Fisher's. Each evening, hotel owners would call to tell the number of guests. The restaurant opened at 5 a.m. and they closed at 2 a.m. They were working. The theater at the Opera House was full each evening. Everyone stopped for a snack there because the theater, Opera House, would have been just over here. When athletic teams won their away games, they knew that John would give them a free meal. Hitchhikers, and apparently there were many back then, were always served free soup. When the Depression hit and the local bank closed, Bert lost everything, but in those days, stores helped each other. And your only competitor was the one in the same line of business. Meat markets and wholesale grocers carried Bert indefinitely, knowing he had never owed anyone. So, why did it do that? I'm the technical support, and I don't know what's happening. Right? So tragedy is just because we didn't want to come to this sad part. Everything's happy, everything's good, everything's running great, and then tragedy strikes. So in 1941, John, who was age 31, and his wife Donna were killed in an auto accident, leaving their young daughters to be taken care of by maternal relatives. Then in 1947, Bert Neppy sold Fisher's Home Restaurant, and Frank Day, who purchased the restaurant, would make it the hangout place for high school kids after event. Thanks to Mark's mom. So that is the information, the history on the Maxwell Brothers clothing store and the Fisher's Home Restaurant.
I just want to say that it's a great honor for me to be able to read the history of the Claxon nursing homes. It was from August 1949 to 1996. Theodore DeHass grew up in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and dreamed for years of something special in nursing homes for those who are aged and infirm in body and mind. Ted DeHass, in furtherance of this idea, procured employment at Maxwell State Hospital in 1935 as a line supervisor, an attendant for the ensuing 11 years, devoted himself to acquiring knowledge of the special needs of the mentally infirm with respect to attaining the utmost in comfort and well-being. With the motto of his early youth, the only thing you can take with you is what you give others, it was but natural that when Mr. DeHass became acquainted with Eileen Baker, who also had a motto, not for ourselves, but for others. They soon were sharing their dream for service to humanity. Miss Baker, who grew up on a family farm in Beach City, and who also graduated from Penn State University as an elementary teacher, had envisioned a larger field of service to the mentally ill, and consequently had entered nursing at the Maxwell Institution. Theodore DeHass and Eileen Baker married in 1935, the same year that she was graduated from the State Hospital for Psychiatric Nurses at Maxwell State Hospital School. Together, they continue to dream of wider and more personal service than afforded in the usual state institution. Theodore DeHass belonged to a barbershop singing group, and he and Eileen came to Millersburg for an event. Dr. Adam Ernie came up to Theodore and Eileen and talked to them about starting a nursing home, and the rest is history. And on August 16, 1949, the dream became a reality with their acquisition of the property which became the original Castle Nursing Home. The DeHasses and sons, Don and Dan, moved into the castle after working at Maxwell State Hospital. Patients started arriving that fall. They started with 8 residents. An important note was that they moved residents into their home to take care of them. By the end of the first year, demand for nursing home care required the DeHasses to enclose 2 of the home's porches. They continued to enlarge the building until all available space was used. During these first years, Ted worked at the home during the day, while Eileen taught at Boyd School on Berlin Township 206 and also Kilbuck Elementary, and managed the business at night. The operation continued to grow, and the DeHass family opened other nursing homes in the Millersburg area. Theodore DeHass died on July 2, 1957. As a female owning a business, she was met with opposition, whether it was dealing with a bank to borrow money or the community's reaction of nursing home. She never gave up and followed her and Theodore's dream of caring for residents that needed help. Mrs. DeHass and her sons continued the legacy. Some of the buildings owned by the DeHass family was the Castle, Sunset, Valley View, the Country Castle near New Pittsburgh in Wayne County, Terrace View, Overlook, Scenic View, Fairview, Hilltop, Oak Point in Canton, and Greenfield. They also owned a boarding house and many rehabilitation group homes. Eileen DeHass hired between 400 to 600 employees, and at one point was the largest privately owned mild and mental nursing home in the world. And the economic growth in our community was fueled by the Castle Nursing Homes Incorporated. Providing services to the residents included physicians Dr. A.J. Ernie, the medical director of Castle Nursing Homes, Dr. L.W.I., Dr. H. Hart, Dr. M. Robert Houston, Dr. N.P. Stopper, Dr. O.F. Patterson, and Dr. W.A. Powell. Dentists included J.R. Fair, Ellie Wolf, C.H. Yoder, and B.R. Welch. Optometrist R.H. Slayball, and podiatrist was Dr. G.H. Porter. Pictures also was pharmacist Mr. Clifford Snapper. The extras go a long way. Mr. Glenn Miller, baker and cook, is shown with several of the yummy creations. Mr. Miller was responsible for all those delicious donuts and pastries served in the nursing homes and Castle Snack Bar. Good grooming is considered one of the routine parts of nursing care on all wards. The ladies receive hair care and the men barber service. Pictured is Mrs. Martha Lint working her magic. Also pictured is Nola Slagle and Mary Margaret Ingle Parker at the Castle Treasure House of Gifts, a natural outgrowth of the Castle's occupational therapy department. Many of the residents participate in occupational therapy sessions in the working area located in the rear of the gift shop. The 3 generations of the DeHass family is Dan and Ann DeHass and sons Theodore, Daniel Lee, and daughter Leanne, Don and Joan DeHass, and daughters Deborah and Eileen. Also, a Christmas picture of the whole family, including Eileen. Following it, following in Eileen's footsteps, the ones that followed Eileen into nursing was Deborah DeHass Beachy. She's a family nurse practitioner. Bree Close is currently in school to become a nurse practitioner. Gracie Weir is currently going to school to become a medical assistant. and Tiffany DeHass Kaufman is a registered nurse. Following Eileen in teaching is Ava Close, a second-grade teacher in the Triangle District. The Russell Theater opened in 1940 with seating for 500 and was owned by Mr. and Mrs. Hoy Russell. It was designed by Robert S. Hart out of Columbus, Ohio, and was located on Clay Street where the parking lot behind the Chamber of Commerce. In 1942, during the war, the Russell Theater was an official agency for the sale of war bonds. In 1961, the Russell Theater was then bought by the DeHass family and renamed it the Castle Theater. The Castle had its grand opening in 1962. They bought it with the idea of the residents having a place to see films and live entertainment. The first movie shown at the Castle Theater was Gone with the Wind. There was also boxing matches held at the theater, and in 1976, Don DeHass remodeled the theater for rock and country music shows as well as dinner service. Various bands played at the Castle Theater into the 80s. In closing, this is a personal message from Eileen DeHass, the president of Castle Nursing Homes Incorporated. In the mind of the writer of this message, the operation of the Castle Nursing Homes Incorporated is something more than a business. It follows that the reward is vastly more than monetary. Without profit, continued operation would of course be impossible, but the Castle Home Program was the answer to a sincere desire on the part of my deceased husband, Theodore DeHass, and me to be of service to humankind so far as our talents and abilities permit. Through our experience, we have found many new friends as a result of service to them or those dear to them. These friendships we cherish, and it is because of them that I am impelled to carry on with our program despite the loss of Mr. DeHass. Mr. DeHass was proud of our institution and of our reputation in the nursing home field. In respect to his memory and in accord with my own desire, I am firmly committed to continuation of the Castle operation and the furtherance of its policies. I will appreciate an opportunity to personally serve you, and I invite you to bring your problems to me. Just one more note I have is Eileen was a pioneer and a businesswoman who loved her employees, residents, family, and she was larger than life. I want to thank all of the DeHass family, including Deborah DeHass Beachy, Evie DeHass Close, Joan Tootsie DeHass Snyder, Roddy, and his dad Ted DeHass. Thank you for all taking the time to help me with this presentation.
And also, we want to tell you that we did an oral history. Elaine went out and sat with Ted for an hour, and Roddy, I believe, was there. And then several years back, she had done one with Evie and Deborah. And those oral histories, we're going to edit those, get it cleaned up, and add those on the website so that if you want to hear it in their own words, you can hear the history from the DeHass family. That'll be a little bit till we get back. Okay, any questions of any three of the presentation? We got the, yeah, make sure you get the mic because that way the streaming people can hear.
You know, Barnhart, I used to live in
Oh yeah, that's right down here. Yeah.
Yeah,
You can see it out the window. Hold up to your, yeah, there you go. The third floor is a ballroom? Okay, great. I think your mic's back now. You want to check that? No. See if the mic's on.
And then, tennis, we played tennis on the third floor.
You played tennis
Yeah.
on the third floor?
And Don and,
Oh, okay, great. They played tennis on the third floor, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Any other questions, comments? Anybody here work at Castle that wants to share? Over here, okay.
I'm gonna jump on that. Carpet going through. Raise a hand if you work or had a family member that worked at Castle. I think it's a large number of them.
Awesome. Yeah, can you imagine what the impact was economically in the community when you have somebody employing that many people? I mean, it's just amazing to me. I'll share a personal story about Eileen. I used to, in my first career, I was a photographer, and every year they would hire me to come into their annual banquet at Christmas time and do individual portraits of all the families that worked at Castle. I did that for many years. I think, Roddy, there's a picture of you that I took when you were just a little guy in one of those. But Eileen, the portrait you see on the screen, I actually took that in the 80s. I think it may have been the last official portrait that she took, and I took it. And she was such a good customer of mine, and it was just incredible. And I remember her making the comment, she said, I want you to treat my employees to a family picture, because some of them may not be able to afford to get one. And I want you to, you do a good job, I want you to take a picture of them. But then she added this, she goes, but make yourself some money and put a reorder form in each picture. Yeah, I'll pay for one picture and you come out, but you make sure you make some. She was a great lady. I just loved her to death. And my dad used to work for the phone company years ago, and he took care of her phone system at the Castle. And Dad would always be, at Christmas time, Eileen would come down to the phone company with gifts for all the telephone employees. She was just that kind of giving person. I believe she did that with the fire department and the police department as well. Very giving. Any other?
Where was the original Castle Nursing Home Association?
No, it is not standing. It was right down here at the point. If you saw the picture, maybe you can flip back there. That was up right now. It's an empty lot. It's at the point of Bull Street and 83. And you'll notice in the picture it says State Route 76. That's actually before they changed the name. That's where the original Castle. Now, interesting thing. Would you like to have a program on the Castle in the earlier? Now, I'm talking about not Castle nursing homes. Today, I got a phone call. The Hip family used to live in that house before. They sold it to Eileen and Ted. They called me today, and they have so many wonderful stories about living and growing up in that house, including one story that house came from England and was brought over and reinstalled. That's what the original builder of the house. So if you'd like, next year or so, we can do a program on the beginnings of that building, which are very unique. Okay? So, to answer your question, it's an empty lot now. The retaining wall, yeah. The retaining wall is still there in the front. I remember, if you look at this picture really close, you can see it was taken at Christmas time. That was always a big treat when we were growing up in town. Mom and Dad would get us in the car to go out and see, you see the two little pine trees, and they have like all these Christmas decorations up on the roof. It's the only place in town like it. And so everybody would go out there after they put their Christmas decorations up. Any other questions? Yeah, wait, okay. I think it's Kay. Is that you?
I'm Carrie, I'm Dr. daughter.
Right.
I just want to mention that Eileen sent many people to college. Many in nursing school, she sent me through college for medical records, and she never required anybody to promise any years to stay with her, and there's probably
and also nursing school.
Oh,
Rodney, do you have any idea, does family know how many people should pay to go through nursing school? Because it was a lot.
I don't know, my dad might know.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, anybody else?
So, when I was in high school, I worked at Claxon and I handled my supervisor, like constantly, I would let them meet, really? And one day I was out at sunset, and in she walks to meet me, and I just couldn't believe it. She took time out and came to meet me, because that's what I want, to meet her. And that impressed me so much about her, and everything she had going on. She came in because she knew I wanted to meet her, and I just thought that was something.
Any other questions? That lady in there, she keeps saying Bluetooth, but she keeps cracking up. Anyway, any other questions or anything? If you have any suggestions for programs, that's what we're here for. We love to get into the meat of these subject matters, and as you can tell by the amount of work these gals put into it, it's just awesome. I want to thank both of them, especially today, Melissa. This gal is incredible. She goes on the radio from 5 to 9, 10. She goes to the Victorian House and works all afternoon from 1 to 4. Not thinking that she would be very busy, ends up with like 2 people this afternoon. Had to go to the hotel after she got off of work to do a program for a quilting group on the bicentennial, and came here, did this. I think she needs a round of applause. And she If there's no other question back there?
Yeah, why don't you do a program on Millersburg School, Millersburg High School? Because sometimes when I look at the old maps, I'm not even sure which direction the original building is facing, like the main door. If it was on Jackson Street, or.
Yeah, there's actually 3 buildings up
Yes.
there. When I was little, they put on what we call the new part, which was, you go through the glass walkway. Yeah, I think you're right, and being the fact that this is going to be the last year the school exists, that maybe next year would be a good time to do something. We'll put that in the program. Okay, anything else? Well, I appreciate the attendance, because we're always excited when we get the community involved, and we hope we enlighten you just a little bit about the National Historic District and why it's important and all that. Oh yeah, some of the upcoming events. We have a soup supper coming up in Ellie. Can we look at the date on the flyer? I can't remember. It's October 23rd.